Much for jumping on
Yeah,
with us. And I,
of course.
your background, I've read and reread because you have so much to your name and that you have
Uh,
accomplished in the hospital and wellness industry. And so I was really excited to talk to you about rest and sleep and kind of this new year and what this means for wellness as we're coming out of basically a year of the pandemic. And
right.
like I said, you're so in tune with the wellness industry. At the beginning of your career, you launched the Urban Day Spa brand Bliss, which many people are going to be aware of. Coming into a new year, though sometimes it doesn't feel quite so new, where is
Mhm,
the wellness industry in terms of the direction it's going? What trends do you see taking hold, if any, or are there kind of just some
mhm.
steady things that we need to continue?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. These this sort of early January deluge of trend reports seems to be a little slower, a little sparser than usual.
Mhm.
But I did listen to a media roundtable at the Global Wellness Summit in Palm Beach earlier. Sorry, in November, and there were a couple of things that really jumped out at me from both a professional standpoint, but also personally.
Mm,
And a couple of those were this kind of blurring of boundaries between traditional healthcare, medical care, and wellness,
mm,
and really a sort of rise and focus on preventative and integrative medicine. So kind of this, I think, sort of presaging this sort of health is the new wealth sort of paradigm,
mhm.
in a really kind of simple and fundamental way. I mean, fitness has shifted so much during this pandemic, and what they spoke to, which resonated with me as well, was this sort of third wave that was going on prior to the pandemic, which was this sort of boutique fitness movement driven by millennials.
Mm.
Kind of this increasingly more specialized niche kind of class model really has, for obvious reasons, sort of been exchanged for this hybrid approach of digital net. And then in real time, this really back to basics approach, in terms of basic fitness, that I think also is important because it really presages a significant democratization of fitness, which
Mm.
is so important because so much in this world, as a result of this year of how can we be more relevant to a larger audience as opposed to the 10%, right? I mean, let's just
Right,
face it, most of wellness has really been kind of driven by kind of the affluent consumer.
right.
And I think the third thing that came out, which is really something that we've been preaching for a really long time, is just this appreciation, this respect, this you know acknowledgement of what nature does to impact our well-being. And what it really is doing is to driving people to seek out travel and lifestyle experiences that are putting them in direct connection with Mother Nature. We've been really kind of advocating this approach for a really long time, of getting the spa outside of a base building and kind of outdoors. So
Mm.
that's exciting.
Yep.
And then I think, if I were to take out my kind of personal crystal ball for 2021, or maybe even leading into 2022, I think it depends upon how long this pandemic, kind of stretches,
Right.
is really this proverbial brass tacks approach. I think everything coming a return back to basic and timeless aspects of well-being. The idea of creating connection and sense of belonging, that sort of human element, human touch, interpersonal contact, resiliency, mindfulness, and then of course the sort of things that people are front of mind for people with regard to COVID is immunity building and respiratory health and breath work, things like that. So I really do think for a while there's going to be a reset, and it's not going to be about all of these like sort of weird out there woo woo things. I think it's really going to be about sort of really basics, like a foundational approach, and getting people access to those sort of experiences.
Absolutely. Do you, coming into this year, do you personally have anything that you kind of want to instill that maybe kind of fell off the train from last year, or you kind of just staying steady?
It's funny. I usually sort of I'm resistant to load up on resolutions because they, they
Yeah.
often fall by the wayside for me, and I'm guilty. So I'm kind of like, but you know what? This year I did make one sort of commitment, if you will, and it really falls squarely in the emotional, the mental realm. Is my goal to try and approach life's stickier situations, with a sense of optimism, humor, and sort of openness, rather than kind of coming to the table or leading in with fear and negativity. So that's really something front of mind for me. It's just really become, it's so clear to me that when I shift my mindset of a particular situation, there's such tremendous power to really, create sort of a sense of happiness and well-being. And I'm really sort of, that In Vogue song from back in the 90s, I'm dating myself here, but this whole idea of like freeing your mind and the rest will
Yeah,
follow. I'm
I
really
love that
trying,
song. Great song.
yeah, right. Really trying to sort of embrace that. Good, you're of my generation. That
I
wasn't,
am.
that was
I am. I love that song. Now I'm gonna have that like free your mind. Yeah, I'm gonna just be.
yeah, yes, absolutely.
How are you working towards that? Are there steps that you're taking? Because I mean, it's one thing to say, I'm gonna go in with a positive mindset. It's another thing to do it.
Of course,
Uh,
that's the whole thing. I just, when I feel myself going to that very familiar place,
yep,
it's really just a sense of, you don't need to do that. Here's what you can do. I mean, it's like literally that kind of split second conversation that we have with ourselves constantly.
yep,
That's what I'm doing. And then I'm like, and like breathe and smile, like those sort of physical cues. I mean, it seems so a little Pollyanna, but it's not. I mean, for me, I mean, I'm such a classic New Yorker, hard charging, blah, 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 and it's just like slow down, breathe, and be present. And so that's kind of the way I am approaching it. It's not like, and there are times when I'm like, oh, that sounds really, this feels really familiar. I mean, and not in every situation, but yeah, that's really, it's really just being aware and kind of sort of mentally making that pivot.
yeah. We just talked to someone for this will actually air in March, and we talked to someone for February, and she's really big on breath work and just going through in the breath, and it's amazing the power of it, and the distinction between you have to breathe to live, but then there's also this like kind of quality breath that can bring about.
How short and tiny our breaths typically are, especially as in
Yes,
stressful situations.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, it's incredible. Again, it seems
That's not
simple.
this whole respiratory. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Right.
But hard. It's hard because we're so ingrained to, kind of in this sort of constant like adrenal rush, fight or flight thing. It's just like it's a very different way of approaching life.
Yeah, yeah,
So I'm
like
saying like my goal to kind of bring that into my daily living more regularly and but also with the goal of just like I don't want to be negative or resentful or I mean my God we have a president. No, I should stop because that's not part of this.
yeah,
I just do not want to be I don't want to lead with that kind of that mindset.
right, right. And that's, I mean, that's kind of a good transition into my next question when I want to talk about quality rest and quality sleep. I mean, you being in the spa industry, you know how important that is.
Yeah.
Not just
Hmm.
sleep, not just resting, but the qualityness of it. And so, but
Sure.
it eludes a lot of people right now. Um,
Yep. Well, good
and a lot of
reason, but
people aren't
yeah.
making it a priority. So why do you think that is? I mean, I think people know how important sleep is. I mean, we being a sleep company, we do a ton of research on it, but I'm still so shocked by how much it eludes people.
Yeah, well, I think it stems from a couple of dynamics. I think, speaking to what you just mentioned, I still think, there isn't the same priority, let's say, put upon it. And there's maybe a lack of awareness um, of the role that sleep plays in physical and mental health. I mean, yes, there certainly is a shift,
Mhm.
but I do find it's interesting that many of the same people who fully embrace the benefits of regular exercise and proper nutrition, often don't place that same priority on sleep. And I
Right.
think that's changing. I still think there's sort of, a lot of that sort of holdover effect. And then the other thing is, I think it's about this American, specifically American infatuation with productivity and success, this whole work
Yes.
hard, play hard mantra.
Yep.
That does not put a lot of priority on the benefits of stillness, reflection, downtime, which for me are really underlying precursors to good sleep.
Mm-hmm. And it's so funny because that we have that time now. Oh, I mean, maybe not all of us. Everyone's weathering different storms, but
Sure.
there is a shift of people have that time. So how can people make, in your opinion, how can people make sleep a priority, quality sleep, or even quality rest? Like I won't even go to actually falling asleep, but
Mhm.
having those moments where you are resting and restoring yourself.
Well, I think for me, it comes back to that whole priority piece.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I still think many people, it's like it's a negotiating point, right? I mean, and with all the other competing demands of life, sleep seems to be the one that falls by the wayside. And then the other thing I think is really approaching sleep. Really, we're all about this whole self-care kind of explosion, but sleep in its own way really is the ultimate self-care ritual. So I think applying that same sense of mindful and meaningful intention to bedtime as one does for other parts of life. I think just that, again, I guess I'm going back to that whole mindset and mindfulness approach, but rather than sort of tactical laundry list of things, really just making it a priority and embracing it.
Right. Right. And I want to pivot away from sleep because I would like, we have about 10 minutes or so, and I want to hear about how the spa industry is doing. I want to hear
Mm,
about how you guys are handling this because again, the turn of the year, I think a lot of people felt like, okay, you know, we're going to
yeah,
hit the ground
right.
running, and it's kind of, we're in the same situation and we're going to be in the same pandemic situation for a while. So how is the industry at
Yeah.
large looking?
Well, I mean, luckily for me and for my company, TLEE Spas, I mean, we're on the development side as opposed to operating, existing spa businesses. So, lucky for us that the pipeline, I mean, wellness, we're going to come out of this at some point, and wellness, has proven ascendant in kind of all aspects of life, including, in the hospitality space, which is
Right.
primarily where we work. But I will tell you, depending on the location, I mean, Florida is doing well. I guess they've made that approach to kind of open up their entire economy. But many places in this country, I mean, hotels have not reopened,
Right.
or if they have, the spa has not reopened, or if the spa has reopened, it's a very sort of skeleton sort of experience. I mean, most of the time, people will check in and go right to their treatment room, and there will be all sorts of protective measures in place, and then they leave. So it's quite kind of abbreviated, if you will. I mean, it is, when I think about the hospitality industry in general, I mean, it's an epidemic. I mean, people are, wholesalely out of work.
Right.
Of course, that will change very quickly. I think what's going to be very interesting is kind of keeping pace with consumer demand as that ramps up, as people start to feel more, more comfortable in those kind of spaces and have the financial resources to do that. Well, let's face it, very wealthy people have done just fine in this pandemic. I mean,
Mhm.
luxury is not going to, be hit. It's sort of the old adage. It'll be interesting to see how operators in the hotel space kind of respond. Sort of, you know, I'm a little concerned that this goal is, you'll open up a hotel spa and, with a spa director and an attendant and, a couple of staff, when I think really these reopenings are going to be all about instilling kind of security and comfort, not only on part of the guests, but also on part of the staff. And that there's a real appreciation for that process, so that people, because, in the spa, to be like have a really meaningful spa experience, or treatment experience, I should say, these therapists really give a lot to those, give a lot of their intention and their energy. If they're freaked out, stressed out, angry, like, we lose. So I really hope that decision makers, in terms of ramping up again, really place a priority on nurturing and training their staff to handle these situations, and they recognize that is as important as welcoming in, clients or guests.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Okay, last question. Ask all the guests this. And we're coming back to sleep. Uh, what is
Okay.
one thing that you do for your sleep every day?
Okay, let's see here. Well, here's by personal proclivity, by instinct, I always ditch like my devices well before bedtime. I always have, especially now. It's like work is done. I am not sneaking away and looking at emails that are coming in at 8 and 9 o'clock at night because you know
True.
what? Don't need to bother. And so, there's that piece for me.
Mhm.
And I think, I maintain a pretty consistent sleep schedule. And I'm a Virgo. I kind of am
Oh,
pretty
me
routine
too.
based.
Me too.
Oh, Virgos unite.
Yes.
And then I also do the other thing is we worked on the Equinox Hotel in Hudson Yards, and one of the big things that they were really kind of claiming was this whole science of sleep. And so I learned a few things, in that project, and it's what I do for my own kind of environment is really making sure that my bedroom is clean and serene, but it's dark, it's very chilly. I typically do not put on the heat in the wintertime. And it really just really helps me with the quality of my sleep. So yeah, well, it's more than one thing, but that's sort of the kind of the combo plate that I do on a
Yeah, that's
daily
great.
basis.
That's your ritual. That's your routine. That's how you get there. That's wonderful. I mean, I think a lot of people could we have said a lot of those things. We've written a lot of articles about different aspects that you just said, the devices, the cleanliness of the room, the clearness of the room. I mean, there are
It's
just
healing
so
the
many.
room. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's amazing to me. I would never be able to sleep well if I had like a room with like shit all over the place and
Oh,
clothes
me
on the
either.
yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, on the same
I
page.
feel your pain, Virgo. Yeah.
Well, Michael, I cannot thank you enough for coming on with us. I know it was a quick
Oh, it's
chat, but you
it's
packed
really
a lot of
fun.
information in there, and we just so appreciate you, and we so appreciate your time.
Oh, it's my pleasure. First of all, and I think it's Allison's birthday today, so happy birthday, Allison.
You're so sweet. I will pass that on for
Really good
sure.
to meet you. Really good to meet you. Please stay in